She used to text you back instantly. Now it takes hours. She used to be excited about your plans. Now she's busy every weekend. And then she says something, just one phrase, that makes your stomach drop because you finally realize what's really going on. Look, I've been that guy. Completely blind to what was happening right in front of me. Thinking I was just being patient, giving her space, being understanding. Meanwhile, she was already giving her attention to someone else. The worst part? The signs were there the whole time. She was practically telling me. I just wasn't listening. Oh, and before we continue, I've got something special for you. A free ebook, The Female Mind Control Handbook. It reveals the hidden secrets to making any woman crave you. Grab it now, link in the description or pinned comment. Let's get into the hard truths. The vague reference drop. One of the first signs that there's someone else in the picture is when she starts making vague references to someone or this person in her life. She's not being deliberately secretive. She's just unconsciously creating space for this new person in her conversations. Listen for phrases like, "Someone told me about this restaurant." "I was talking to someone about that movie." "Someone recommended this book to me." Now, everyone has friends and conversations, but when these vague references start popping up frequently, especially when she used to be more specific about her social circle, it's worth paying attention. I remember this woman I was dating who suddenly started saying things like, "Someone at work said the funniest thing," or "I was discussing this with someone yesterday." Before, she would have said, "My co-worker Sarah," or "My friend Mike." The shift to anonymous references was her subconscious way of protecting this new person's identity. Why does this happen? When someone new enters our romantic landscape, we instinctively create a buffer zone around them. We're not ready to fully introduce them to our existing connections, but we can't help referencing them because they're occupying mental space. The key is frequency and context. If she's constantly mentioning conversations with unnamed people, especially about topics you used to discuss together, someone else is becoming her go-to person for those conversations. Pay attention to the emotional tone too. Does she light up when talking about what someone said? Does she seem excited to share these anonymous interactions? That enthusiasm is telling you something important. The schedule. Excuse that doesn't add up. When someone new enters the picture, time becomes a precious commodity. She's not just busy, she's strategically busy. Her schedule suddenly becomes filled with activities that don't quite make sense or don't align with her previous patterns. The telltale phrase here is often, "I'm really busy with work, family, friends right now." But here's the thing, everyone's busy. The difference is that people make time for what they prioritize. When someone is genuinely interested in you, they find pockets of time. When someone else is taking priority, your time gets pushed to the margins. I dated this woman who went from having flexible evenings to suddenly being swamped every night. But her social media told a different story. She was clearly out and about, just not with me. Her work schedule hadn't actually changed. Her priorities had. Look for these specific patterns. Weekend plans that were previously flexible are now consistently unavailable. Evening calls that used to happen regularly are now too late or too early. Spontaneous meetups that she used to enjoy are now impossible due to commitments. The excuse that doesn't add up is when her busy schedule seems to have appeared overnight. People don't go from having time for you to having zero availability without something significant changing in their life. Another red flag is when the busyness is selective. She's too busy for dinner but has time for a quick text. Too busy for weekend plans but available for a phone call. This selective availability often means she's managing multiple relationships and trying to keep everyone satisfied without creating conflict. The emotional distance language. When someone's emotional energy is being directed elsewhere, their language changes. They become less invested in emotional conversations and more focused on surface-level interactions. Pay attention to these phrases. "That's nice," instead of engaging with what you shared. "Okay," instead of asking follow-up questions. "Interesting," when she used to dive deeper into topics. This isn't about being moody or having a bad day. This is about consistent emotional withdrawal. When someone new is capturing her emotional attention, she has less energy for the emotional labor of your relationship. I noticed this with a woman I was seeing who went from asking thoughtful questions about my day to giving generic responses. When I shared something important, she'd say, "That's good," instead of the curious, caring responses I was used to. Her emotional bandwidth was being used elsewhere. The shift is usually gradual. First, she stops initiating deeper conversations. Then she responds to your emotional shares with less enthusiasm. Finally, she starts redirecting conversations away from anything too personal or intimate. This happens because emotional intimacy requires investment. When someone else is receiving that investment, there's less available for you. She's not necessarily being mean, she's just unconsciously managing her emotional resources. The communication pattern shift. One of the most obvious signs is when communication patterns change dramatically. This isn't about being busy occasionally. It's about a fundamental shift in how she engages with you. The phrase that should make you pay attention, "Sorry, I'm not great at texting lately." But here's what's really happening. She's not bad at texting. She's just not prioritizing texting with you. When someone new enters the picture, communication patterns shift dramatically. I experienced this with someone who went from being a consistent communicator to suddenly being bad at phones. But I noticed she was still active on social media, still responding to group chats, still maintaining other relationships. She wasn't bad at communication. She was deprioritizing our communication. Watch for these specific changes: response times that go from quick to hours or days, text quality that goes from thoughtful to generic, conversation initiation that goes from mutual to one-sided, phone calls that go from regular to rare. The most telling sign is when she acknowledges the change but doesn't make effort to fix it. "I've been terrible at staying in touch," but then doesn't actually improve. This suggests the poor communication isn't accidental. It's reflective of her actual priorities. The future conversation avoidance. When someone's romantic attention is divided, they become uncomfortable discussing future plans. They're not sure where things are heading, so they avoid committing to anything that assumes continuity. Listen for these phrases. "We'll see," when discussing upcoming events. "I'm not sure what my schedule looks like," for things weeks away. "Let's just take things as they come," when you try to make plans. This avoidance isn't necessarily about your specific relationship. It's about her trying to keep options open while she figures out her feelings for someone else. I dated someone who went from being excited about future plans to being vague about everything. "Concert next month? We'll see. Weekend trip we'd discussed. I need to check my schedule. Holiday plans? It's too early to decide." The shift from specific future planning to vague deflection is significant. When someone is fully invested in a relationship, they naturally include you in their future thinking. When someone else is in the picture, that future becomes uncertain. The social media tell. In today's digital world, social media behavior can be incredibly revealing. When someone new enters the romantic picture, social media activity often shifts in noticeable ways. The phrase that should get your attention, "I'm taking a break from social media," or "I don't really post much anymore." But often what's really happening is that she's being more selective about what she shares publicly because she's managing multiple relationships or doesn't want to send mixed signals. I noticed this pattern with someone who suddenly stopped posting stories or photos when we hung out, despite previously being very active on social media. She wasn't taking a break, She was being strategic about what she shared. Watch for decreased posting about her social activities. Less engagement with your posts specifically. Stories that seem to exclude certain activities or people. Changes in how she tags or mentions people. The social media shift often reflects her internal conflict. She's not ready to be public about new relationships, but she's also not comfortable being public about existing ones. The emotional unavailability excuse. When someone's emotional energy is being directed towards someone new, they often become unavailable for emotional intimacy in predictable ways. This emotional unavailability often manifests as reluctance to discuss relationship status, discomfort with emotional conversations, decreased physical affection, avoidance of intimate moments. The excuse isn't necessarily false. She might genuinely be confused or overwhelmed. But the timing and context usually reveal that someone else is part of the equation. If this video opened your eyes to some patterns you've been ignoring, hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments. Sometimes we need to hear these truths from someone else to finally see what's been right in front of us. Remember, you deserve clarity, not confusion. You deserve someone who's all in, not someone who's keeping their options open. See you in the next video.